On May 12th, 2019, I posted a tweet featuring a copy of Persona 4 Arena for the Xbox 360 I had bought for $10. And on it was a tongue-in-cheek caption, "I have succumbed to spin-off hell." For those who know Persona, this joke was obvious, a jab at Atlus's insistence to milk Persona 4 to a point of almost implosion. To me, this seemed like a cheap pickup for my slowly growing Megami Tensei collection. I didn't own many non-Nintendo consoles, just my PS2 and Xbox One, so I was just kind of collecting as I could play. The Persona spin-offs have a bit of a reputation. The main series is highly respected in the JRPG space, mostly being known for its blend of social sim elements and dungeon crawling with turn-based combat, and how those disparate game styles feed into themselves to provide its addicting game loop. The spin-offs, however, tend to be smaller-scale projects, with surface-level character writing, over-reliance on fan service, and generally are the equivalent of video game junk food. Nothing with a lot of staying power. Even today, as Atlus is getting better at making spin-offs with more of a focus, they still miss the mark more often than not. It's safe to say I didn't have many expectations going in. I'm terrible at action games, always have been, and of course I had never bothered to get into fighting games. So, as I put the game in the console, I had the expectations that you would for watching a B-movie. Something that would be fun in the moment, but nothing super important. I didn't start the story at first though, because I didn't have time that day. So instead, my brother and I each picked up a controller. I picked the best girl in Persona 4, and I won the game by fumbling with buttons and stopping Che with gunshots. My only reaction was to laugh. 1 month later, I had bought a PS3 and a sealed copy of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. I played almost every day that summer. That was the moment I realized that Persona 4 Arena is brilliant. I think one of the most impressive things about Persona 4 Arena, and its sequel Ultimax, is how it was able to seamlessly adapt a slow, turn-based RPG style into a chaotic, yet refined fighting game. On the surface, it seems that the Persona RPGs and the fighting game genre could not be further apart. Even looking at discussion boards at the time, the reaction of the community was a mix of excitement and utter bewilderment. Sure, other game styles have been adapted into fighting games before, but the success stories tend to be a lot more sparse than the failures. Even from Arc System Works itself, its fighting game adaptations have been infamous in the FGC. I think what made this game different was its approach to mechanical compromise and adherence to both the fighting game genre and the Persona source material. Originally conceived as an idea by Atlus in an attempt to both make a fighting game and to expand the Persona brand, the Arena games would be co-developed along Arc System Works, creators of the BlazBlue and Guilty Gear series. What's interesting is that the game was created to be a labor of love to both the fighting game genre and Persona 4, which is why the collaborative effort was so strong. Arena director Kazuhiro Wada, Persona 4 director Katsura Hashino, and Persona character designer Shigenori Soejima were big fighting game fans, and saw the collaboration with Arc System Works as a way to bring that love into the Persona series. ArcSys, for their part, were surprised by the offer, but gladly struck up a partnership to bring Persona 4 Arena into reality. The partnership specifically focused on ArcSys' Team Blue, the studio in charge of BlazBlue, and the final game very much represents that style. Team Blue's experience with the BlazBlue series, and its wild character archetypes and mechanics, in hindsight seemed like the perfect fit of a studio to adapt an RPG into a fighting game. They could give the game its own RPG-based identity, unlike anything the studio had made before, while also letting it be the mechanically sound game that people love BlazBlue for. This approach to game design, of juggling the two sides, is what made the collaboration so important. If it was just Arc System Works, the game would feel a little too similar to BlazBlue, and if they weren't in the picture at all, the game would be a mechanical mess. The involved collaboration of both companies allowed the game to come out as it did, and viewing it in that lens sheds light on the innovation that led this labor of love to be enjoyed for so many years. As mentioned before, Persona is a highly respected JRPG series that fuses typical dungeon crawling mechanics with those of visual novels. Characters are very well developed, and this identity is entailed to their personas, creating a harmony between combat style and personality. The games are dialogue rich and takes a very slow, methodical style to progression and combat. Because of this setup, Arc System Works and Atlus had a few distinct advantages and disadvantages when it came to designing the Arena games. Advantage number 1, appeal. The Persona games are well regarded for its party members and how well defined their personalities are. This gives a bit of an easy in for this game, since a fighting game will sell or fail by the appeal of its roster. The The Persona 4 cast is very well loved, with the PS2 RPG being one of the best-selling games that Atlus had made at that time. Translating these characters into the BlazBlue sprite style would be a simple affair that needed little modification, since each character's design was made to be colorfully diverse. Advantage number 2, archetype adaptation. The RPGs have also done a lot of the heavy lifting of the character design process. Each moveset can be direct adaptations from the RPGs with little compromise. Naoto is a markswoman, Yosuke is a fast and nimble ninja character, Chie does improv kung fu, Kanji's weapon of choice, the chair, brings to mind wrestling, so we have our grappler. Yu is the malleable blank slate protagonist, so it only makes sense for him to be the honest Shoto archetype. Character aspects fit into moves and archetypes from Arc System Works' other fighting games, meaning these tools can be reused and tweaked to fit certain characters. Once the core mechanics of the game were set in stone, the actual design work would be straightforward, leaving Team Blue with plenty of time to think through and develop more experimental character mechanics. Advantage number 3, design space. For other studios, this might be a challenge, but for Arc System Works, the company who turned billiards into a fighting game with Venom, creating new and experimental styles in fighting games is what the company is best at. Adapting an RPG gave the team a lot of unique design space, allowing some conventional rules of fighting games to be shattered. This is why we have Naoto and Elizabeth's instant death attacks, Chie and Yosuke's buff abilities, and Risei's rhythm game super. It's why Kuromaru has a health bar and not a usage gauge, and Junpei has his baseball diamond. Disadvantage number 1, identity. Moving to what the company had going against it, the core of a fighting game is, obviously, about the fighting. While the Persona series has plenty of combat to draw from, the fact that several core elements of the game needed to be cut, namely the social sim elements and Velvet Room fusion, meant that Persona 4 Arena could have had the possibility of an identity crisis, since without anything to make up for what was cut, it would essentially be an adaptation of half of what was so loved about Persona 4. Disadvantage number 2, conversion. They had to turn Megami Tensei turn-based combat into an action game. I feel like this last issue needs to be emphasized because action games just don't happen in this series. Before the release of Persona 4 Arena, the only action-based Megami Tensei titles were the Raito Kuzunoho games, which were well-liked but experimental, and Jack Brothers, a simple top-down shooter. For a series that embraces its turn-based roots, even into the modern day, turning a command-based number system into a quality real-time competitive arcade fighter was an incredibly difficult task. But, as games like Melty Blood demonstrate, it's not impossible. In order to understand Atlus and Arc System Works' approach to adapting Persona 4 gameplay mechanics into Arena, it's important to examine what the core Persona 4's combat is. They are as follows. Number 1, basic JRPG elements. Obviously, the game is turn-based and comes with all the basic mechanics of your average turn-based RPG. Experience in leveling, basic attacks, basic guarding, resource management, spells, stat spreads, character customization. Number 2, elemental affinities, a mainstay of all Megami Tensei games. The series has a heavy emphasis on the use of elemental spells. Each character has weaknesses and resistances to each element, and the combination of their affinities and spell access defines each character's role in battle. Number 3, turn manipulation. The press turn system has become a franchise staple since SMT Nocturne. By exploiting an enemy's weakness, you gain access to more turns to use against an enemy. Persona 4 utilizes a modified version of the system called the One More system, pioneered by Persona 3. By using an elemental attack, you knock the enemy down into a vulnerable state, giving you one more turn. When all the enemies are knocked down, you get the all-out attack, which is basically a bunch of free damage to all enemies for the cost of only the one more turn you would have gotten otherwise. If the elemental affinities didn't define Persona 4's combat, this system absolutely does. Number 4, Personas. More of a stylistic aspect than a gameplay one, the special attacks in Persona 4 are provided by the Personas, guardian spirits taken form. While it doesn't really change much of the gameplay outside of the protagonist, having a Persona game without the Personas would be a very strange call. All in all, the Persona series has a very unique twist on turn-based combat, and most of it does need to be adapted. For someone who has never played a fighting game on a technical level before, this may seem impossible. However, the basic mechanics of a turn-based RPG actually have a lot in common with fighting games. Here's what I mean. The fundamentals of playing any fighting game are based on the understanding of move applications. Each move in a character's toolset has a startup animation, active hitting animation, and a recovery animation. After you hit someone, using another move during the recovery will cause the animation to cancel into the startup of the next move, until eventually a move is reached where you cannot cancel anymore. These links will vary incredibly between long strings of attacks like something in BlazBlue to the simple special canceling of Street Fighter, but in general this approach applies to all fighting games. The full string of attacks cancelled from one into another is called a combo. Now, what happens when you do this same string of attacks but the opponent is blocking? Well, when an opponent blocks an attack, they enter a blocking animation called block stun. Depending on the attack used, the opponent in a blocking animation will exit block stun either before or after the recovery animation of the attacking player. The difference in frames for each player is called frame advantage. Let's bring this into a real example. Here, my character is applying attacks to a blocking opponent in the corner. This move, direct locked, is minus on block, meaning that my opponent will finish recovering from his block stun faster than I will for my attack recovery. This entire sequence of attacks is known as a turn. And now that I've finished with a move that is unsafe to continue attacking from, my opponent is now allowed to take their turn now. This back and forth between attacking and blocking is eerily similar to the back and forth of a turn-based RPG. And the more you look at how fighting games are played, the more they effectively become turn-based games. Every character obviously has their own moves, with their own frame data, their own damage values, and their own HP, so they obviously have their own stats. This bar down here, this is meter. And it's a resource that you manage to achieve your most powerful effects, just like casting a spell in something like Final Fantasy. In fact, in Persona 4 Arena, this is called the SP gauge, which is the spellcasting resource in the Persona games. While there is no experience bar, it could be said that the player is learning to get better at the game in question, by understanding matchups and making reads of the opponent. And all of this could be considered a personal experience bar that levels up as you play more matches. Fighting games, it turns out, are kind of like turn-based RPGs and have a lot in common with turn-based combat. With this basis established, it becomes clear how else the team approached the design of translating combat into Persona 4 Arena. Exploiting elemental weaknesses, unfortunately, cannot be achieved in a fighting game without matchups being horribly lopsided. See Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So instead, Arc System Works chose to apply the more unique mechanics of Persona elsewhere. Let's start with the one more system. In the RPGs, in order to get a knockdown for a one more, you need to willingly cast a spell, taking the resource cost, knock down the opponent, and get a one more to get another turn. To any Arc System Works fan, this should sound familiar. Known as the Roman Cancel in Guilty Gear, or Rapid Cancels in BlazBlue, this ability immediately cancels the attack being used, allowing for an extension of your offense. The trade-off is 50% of your meter. In Persona, Roman cancels have been renamed to one more cancels, and also cost half of your meter. While there is no element or knockdown component, what this essentially does is allow you to spend your resources to take another turn, just like in the Persona games. All-out attacks, likewise, are a clever adaptation of a system from other ArcSys games. In Guilty Gear, the dust attack is an overhead, meaning that can only be blocked when the opponent is standing. If the opponent blocks low, or not at all, they are launched up into the air, allowing for free damage. Likewise, an all-out attack in Persona is an overhead attack, and when it hits, you get a bunch of free damage. I love this translation for two reasons. First, an all-out attack will always hit when the opponent is crouching, aka on the ground, just like if you had knocked them down. Second, it gives a bunch of free damage for no resource, just like in the RPGs. Elements in Persona tend to be more cosmetic differences in magic than actual elements, but I think ArcSys struck a nice balance with the tying of status effects to some elements. For example, getting hit by Yu's Zeodyne skill will put the opponent into a shocked state, leaving them unable to move for a short time unless they roll or short hop. Getting hit by Mitsuru's ice spells will freeze you, leaving you unable to do anything unless you mash the controls left and right to break out. Light and dark spells both grant instant kill effects under the right conditions, and the trick with them is the correct application, with fate management for Naoto and this for Elizabeth. Fire and wind spells tend to be less definitive as an element, but their users are more diverse to the point where it doesn't become an issue. In Fire's case, for example, Yukiko's Fire Boost powers up her fire attacks, whereas Junpei has this mess based on physical attacks, and Koromaru is the best character in the game by being attached to a Lightning Spear user. Atlus and ArcSys clearly thought status effects were a good idea and went nuts with them. This makes sense, since one of the many strategies in RPGs is the use of status effects, and here, they are absolutely insane in the best way possible. There's Confusion, which inverts controls, Silence, which seals off your persona, Fear, which makes your grabs untechable and makes everything a fatal counter, and so many more. Many characters have access to some kind of stats effect move, and they serve an important part of adaptability in the Persona Arena metagame. The final adaptation worth talking about is probably the most obvious for those paying any kind of attention to the screen, the Personas. In 1998, Arc System Works helped invent the puppet character with Zato 1. In essence, the player could control both the character on screen and a second sub-character at the same time. Here, in the modern day, Arc System Works has turned everyone into a puppet character in the form of personas. Every character has two sets of buttons, a light and a heavy attack button, and a light and a heavy persona attack button. These Persona abilities tend to be very powerful. They fuel the supers and specials tied to those buttons, and for some characters are the source behind their reversals. The range of puppetness will obviously vary with each character. Akihiko is a straight brawler, and will tend to use his persona for aerial pokes and vacuum setups. Shadow Labros, on the other hand, is defined by how she interacts with her persona, making her a true puppet character. Personas are incredibly useful, cover a large amount of space, and can work as attacks with no hurt box for the player to lose health. In order to balance a persona's usability, they are each given cards, and serve as a secondary health bar. A persona getting hit makes it lose one card and makes it disappear from the screen. Losing all the cards seals away your persona attacks and abilities for a short time. This mechanic makes the personas an integral part in any fight you play, because their abilities and range have to be weighted in importance with durability. Personas often are tied to a character's win condition, and without them, they are left as sitting ducks, creating an interesting risk-reward system outside of the player's normal health bar. Arc System Works also added a few of their own signature mechanics to give the game an even better feeling of freedom. Burst serves as a get-out-of-jail-free card when stuck in a combo, and takes the form seen in games like Guilty Gear. Using a burst at the right time will let you out of pressure for free, but using it at the wrong time can cause the opponent to get a free combo on you that they wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. Burst can also be used offensively, as either a powerful one more burst to extend for massive air combos, or as gold burst in neutral to get 100 free SP meter. The game was also one of the first to use an auto combo system. By pressing the light attack button a series of times, your character will automatically enact a series of attacks culminating in a super. While handy for beginners, the later parts of the combo are generally not preferred for optimal play unless the opponent is at low life. Air dashing is probably a given, seeing as it's an Arc System Works staple, but seeing as air dashers are an entire subset of fighting games, it's still an important one to acknowledge. Awakening is a very interesting mechanic. When a non-shadow character gets below 35% HP, they gain access to the Awakening status. This grants buffs to their stats, 50 free meter, and their SP gauges extend by 50 for 150 total SP. Awakening also lets them use a powerful super that they could not use otherwise. In the sequel, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, most characters have a shadow form. As of version 1.1, each character gets 2000 more HP and 20% less damage while in shadow form, as well as eternal access to the Awakening supers and a different auto combo. Activating Burst with Shadow characters with 100 meter, or Shadow Burst in 2.0, causes them to enter an infinite SP mode for a temporary amount of time called Shadow Frenzy. This also grants them combos that they would not be able to achieve without Shadow Frenzy, making everything cancelable into everything. I like this as an abstraction of what the Shadow characters stand for in the RPGs. Powerful boss characters with an infinite SP pool and often multiple attacks per turn. Guard Cancel Attack/Roll allows you to break blocks in exchange for 50 meter, acting as a reverse one more cancel. It serves to keep the offensive player on their toes. Super Canceling allows you to cancel almost any move into a super move in exchange for recoverable blue health. The final flair Arc System Works added to the Persona mix were instant kills, a signature of their Guilty Gear and BlazBlue series. By having 100 meter and being on the match point, you can execute an instant kill, most of which aren't very useful, some of them are straight up useless, but the landing of them can be extremely rewarding in the right situations. By the end of development, Persona 4 Arena and Ultimax were incredibly rich fighting games, with an excellent mix of depth, strategy, newcomer-friendly mechanics, and controlled chaos for it to be one of the most well-remembered fighting games of its time. Exactly 10 years after Arena 1's release, this series has become well-loved in the hearts of both Persona and the FGC. Persona fans will remember it as the game that gave them Labros and Show. They'll also remember it as a genuine attempt to expand the scope of Persona 4, and as the game that gave satisfying ends to their favorite Persona 3 and Persona 4 characters. Fighting game players remember it as the incredibly complex and fast-paced game with wild exchanges in game pacing due to Awakening, where most of the cast was extremely powerful and also extremely bullshit. And for people who love both, it feels like a match made in heaven, where your playtime in the fighting game could outdo your playtime in the RPGs. In the last few years, the Persona 4 Arena spotlight has died down in the mainstream. However, while more Arc System Works fighters have since come out, the community never really went away. People like Moopoke and his friends have been making videos on this game for over 5 years now. Juna has turned Persona into a part of his channel identity. Wooly has been asking the series to return for years, Lord Knight has been doing a series of character retrospectives, and the variety of console and emulated PC players have been keeping the game going strong with consistent online and offline tournaments. For me personally, the game redefined what I thought video games could be. I thought games should only be strategy focused, with little emphasis on mechanical skill. For me, action games were just a grind. Every Super Mario game, every Sonic game was death after death. I shifted to game styles that I could control, games that required more thinking than skill, and so I prided myself on that intellectual component. But Persona introduced me to fighting games, and showed me that you can have high-level execution skill without losing any of the strategy or mind games that come with it. In fact, the presence of another person heightens that mental component. I became more open to action games, and while I still don't enjoy platformers that much, I can now appreciate the fun of one whenever it gets its hooks into me. Persona 4 Arena did a lot for me. It cemented my love of Naoto Shirogane as my favorite Persona 4 character, and Margaret is my least favorite. It brought me into the Arc System Works fold, where Guilty Gear and BlazBlue reside. It allowed me to cosplay as Yu Narukami at a convention, because I loved how Arena characterized him. And has allowed me to bond with my siblings, as my Naoto vs. Adachi and Naoto vs. Margaret battles have always stuck in my mind. Because of Persona, the fighting game genre has become my second favorite of all time. And it's because of Persona that I was able to cross the gap and engage in games that have given me a level of growth and satisfaction that no other game has been able to do. I love Persona 4 Arena and Arena Ultimax, and I know so many others who love it too. On March 17th, 2022, we'll finally be getting the return of the game we've loved for years. Returning on modern consoles, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax will finally be in the spotlight again, this time in the previously arcade-exclusive 2.5 version. While we won't have rollback netcode at launch. Hey y'all, so as I was editing this, it turns out that as of tonight, what is likely the last night I'm going to be editing this, Atlus just announced that they're going to be adding rollback to the PS4 and PC versions of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax in the summer. So, hot dang, that's really cool. And I mean, I guess this renders this kind of last little rant here invalid. I wish past me could know this, but otherwise, yeah. Enjoy the rest of the video. It will be a game we've been waiting years to return. If anything I have said today sounded intriguing to you, whether you be an FGC veteran or a newcomer who got into the series with Persona 5, I invite you to come play with us. We have an entire new version to learn after all. And while we'll be doing it on inferior netcode, the quality of this game speaks for itself. It's fun, it's deep, and it's totally crazy. It's Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, and to me, and for so many other people, it is brilliant. Hey all, welcome to Quest Clear. I'm Owen.
And I'm MB.
And what we're doing here is we're just kind of making video essays about a variety of topics that we ran to each other in DMs and Discord.
All the time. I figured they'd make into some good video essays, so I kind of asked Owen if he wanted to start up a YouTube channel with me, and here we are.
Yeah. So the way this is going to work is we're going to be switching off every month. This is my month, February, for Persona 4 Arena's 10th year anniversary.
And next month, you'll get to hear more of my voice. So if you're interested in that, feel free to subscribe, like, comment, or just share the video with anyone, if you like the video at least. At least share the channel, because we're not going to have too many ultra-focused topics on one specific thing. Just plenty of games we like playing, plenty of topics we wanted to talk about. So if you like that sort of content, feel free to stick around, and I'll see you next month.
Yeah, and I'll see you guys in April. See you around.